Greetings and welcome to our fifth official podcast for Morrowind Modding Podcasts, and today we're going to be discussing dungeon mods and dungeon design, with such fascinating topics of discussion like, what makes a good dungeon, what some of the key components of dungeon design is, and what first-time dungeon builders often forget, among, many other topics. And in a way, dungeons are sort of the meat of any role-playing game, so good dungeon design is essential for keeping players engaged. And we have a fairly varied panel of modders with me today to discuss this fascinating topic. If you'd like to all just go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'm Dagoth Agahnim. I've worked on mods like Sobitur and Rising, and I'm working on Odai Rising and Cry of Nature again now.
Hello, I'm Darknut. I'm known for Greater Dwemer Ruins and various texture mods. I'm working on Greater Dwemer Ruins version 2 at the moment.
Hi, I'm Lister, on Nexus known as MementoMoritius, on Project Tamriel form known as Moritius. I mostly work on interiors for Project Tamriel. The mods you can know me from is some mods really released for Morrowind Modding Madness, such as Darkskate.
Hi, I'm RubberMan, slightly from England. I work on things like Dwemer Rebirth Project. I'm helping Transmaster with the new Morrowind Rebirth. Dished out several meshes over the years. That's about it, really.
Well, thank you all for being here today. And right away, I want to get the discussion rolling by asking each of you a simple question. What do you think is the most important aspect of dungeon design? Is it a story, the environment of the dungeon itself, the atmosphere, the types of enemies you'll face, or something else altogether?
Personally, I don't think there's a most important. I think every dungeon mod is a bit different, and it takes a lot of different factors coming together the right way to make a good dungeon mod. If you neglect the storytelling, if you neglect the design, it's going to affect it no matter how good another aspect of it is. You have to kind of keep it balanced.
Yeah, I agree with that, a balance. I like to try to have at least one wow moment or two when I'm designing a dungeon.
Balance is always good. I do like the balance, but I think atmosphere is one of the most important things. Definitely atmosphere, lighting and sound.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yes, same as above. I think the atmosphere is the most important thing when it comes to the dungeon design.
Oh yes, and that's kind of the response I was expecting to get from you, RubberMan, since your Dwemer Rebirth Project is very much, or at least very much seems to be, based on atmosphere.
Yeah, well, that was the aim. I like the atmosphere in the Skyrim dungeons, and I want to translate it to Morrowind, really.
I kind of wish they went the other way and made the Skyrim dungeons like Morrowind.
Yeah, no shortcuts and stuff, yep.
But anyway, there's just so many topics to discuss with dungeon design, so I think I'm just going to next ask, just out of curiosity, what do you think is the most difficult aspect of building a dungeon mod?
I know from personal experience, for me, it's trying to figure out what I want the layout to be and how I want to pace progression through it. Because I've always got an idea of wanting to make this big grand design, and then I have to think, okay, how long is this going to take someone to get through? How much time do I want to put on a side area that really has no other purpose to the dungeon other than just looking nice? And I think for me, it's more time management than anything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just trying to find a place to stop, because you can just keep finding. The more you look at it, the more things you think of to add, and then pretty soon it becomes this behemoth that's impossible to get done if you don't watch it.
I think the most difficult thing is coming up with, like for instance, new meshes, but they have to fit the existing dungeons, which can be almost impossible sometimes. You can make a great mesh and then you end up deleting it because it doesn't match the rest of the tile set.
Yes, that's an issue for sure.
Or again, you make a fantastic mesh, but when you put it in there, it's it's got so many faces and verses that it's just inconceivable.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think mesh or layout, because you want to do something interesting, but sometimes you had a much better idea in your head, and uh, when you actually try to create it you suddenly realize it cannot work like this in game. So you need to think ahead about stuff, not just putting stuff like in corridors and other matches, and think it can work somehow. Because from my experience, that doesn't do the trick.
I want to add probably the hardest aspect of modding Morrowind is using Blender.
Oh boy.
I don't use Blender.
I didn't until recently, and don't get me wrong, I actually like it now that I'm been using it enough time to get used to it, but it's definitely an odd duck.
I have all the nice expensive ones, and I use Wings 3D mostly.
Oh, it depends. My perspective. The most annoying thing is working with animations, with the frame count limit, and that kind of stuff, like bones.
So, kind of in a similar vein, what do you think makes a good dungeon mod?
To me, it's just how much fun I'm having whenever I'm playing other people's dungeon mods. I mean, the ones that I keep and go back to are the ones that I had a lot of fun with. It can be, a really interesting and challenging dungeon design like Greater Dwemer Ruins. It can be a really interesting story, someone's personal take on a piece of lore, and then they run off with it and make a really interesting story like Ghost Path Isle. Both of those mods were part of what made me want to make things like Sobitur.
Yeah, I mean, he pretty much nailed it. I mean, if it's fun. I mean, bottom line, if it keeps you interested in the whole package, it looks cool and it's fun. The story's good. I mean, there was the third round of Modding Madness this time. I probably enjoyed all the mods. They were all good that round. I mean, the stories were good, the layouts were good. It was fun, all of them.
Well, for me, the story is most important, but the bottom line is like the fun of playing those mods. The next thing I'm looking on is the overall design, because the story isn't everything. Because when you have a great story but poorly made dungeon for it doesn't match.
I'm afraid I'm back to atmosphere. I just like the atmosphere in the dungeons rather than running around. The story aspect doesn't really bother me. Visuals don't really bother me because my eyes are rubbish.
I do like dungeons. I like puzzle dungeons where it's kind of a balance between danger and solving your way through. And I definitely like puzzles that I can't figure out immediately. That's the ones I remember the most. If it's too easy, it needs to be a brain challenge, at least a little bit.
Unfortunately, you've got to account for people who don't have any brains.
Oh yeah. Definitely know that.
No, yes, and that kind of, brings me to another topic here, because Morrowind Dungeons really didn't have any puzzles or really much in the way of traps, hidden rooms, or really very much in interactive elements, as opposed to, Oblivion and Skyrim, which had a lot more of those sort of things in them. So do you think it's, important for dungeon mods to sort of include those sort of things? Puzzles, traps that you can accidentally trigger, like in Dungeon and Diamond, hidden rooms, and other interactive elements like elevators and so forth?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I intend to add puzzles to every Dwemer Ruin.
I said I like to look at it as the dungeon itself as a character. basically.
And so exactly how I'm trying to hit it at the moment, which is take a dungeon, give it a backstory and a character from the lore, and then do something with the dungeon that reflects that, rather than that, oh look at this one, this is on the coast, but it's exactly the same as the one in Red Mountain. It just doesn't work that way.
I know one design thing that I always try to do is whenever I'm working on the interior, I kind of I keep a notepad next to me and make a basic drawing of what the interior looks like, and whenever I'm outside, I try to make the exterior at least somewhat match it as I'm able to.
Oh, I do that at 3 o'clock in the morning in my sleep.
Yeah, that's actually kind of how I do it too. Like RubberMan. I don't do much sketching, but I see it in my head.
It's always when you go to bed, isn't it, mate?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, I've had those moments, and based on your guys' response, I'm guessing you probably all think that dungeon modders should focus more on adding interactive elements and puzzles, traps, and all that to their mods, because I gotta say, right now, most of the dungeon mods that are coming out from Morrowind, really don't have those sort of things in them. They're more of more traditional vanilla-style dungeons.
The good ones do, though. I mean, the Dream and Dwemer dungeon mod they did for the contest was pretty awesome.
I mean, you can make a good dungeon mod without having, any fancy interactive elements or anything, but they do make it a lot better if you implement them well into it.
Exactly, at key times. Don't have to be overkill. Stuff like that at the right time can just make or break it.
I mean, even if it's just one, if you put it in the right spot and implement it the right way, it makes a huge difference.
Well, I assume you are talking about Legend of Chemua dungeon. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, that was what I was talking about.
That's what stuff I did, so I'm really glad somebody says it's good.
No, it was great. I plan on seeing everything out of that.
Theft is the greatest form of flattery.
Now there was also the the second round challenge mod expedition to, was it Muzzlethan?
Yeah, that was great too. That was G7 is something else when it comes to scripting. I was just gonna say that was a really good example of a really balanced little mod that kind of had a little bit of everything, a little traps, a little exploring, some wow moments. Yeah, there was some really pushed the envelope with Morrowind on a few things on that mod.
Oh yeah, and you can tell with all the complaints from people who said it didn't work, it was really kind of pushing things with the latest version of MWSE.
Yeah, it's been really tempting. I mean, it's really hard for me to not go that route with Greater Dwemer Ruins 2, but I'm going to try to keep it as accessible as possible. I may end up doing a special version where I kind of go crazy on some of that stuff, but I totally see the temptation because you can do so much more. I mean, incredibly more stuff if you go that route. I said no one ever reads the README, so you have to keep it as, user-friendly as possible.
Sort of moving on to our next topic here. How important would you say storytelling, whether through journals or environmental story design, is when, creating a dungeon?
Me personally, I'm a lore geek. I love to learn all the lore there is about the game I'm playing, if it has lore. I like to learn the stories, the backgrounds, why things are the way they are. So to me, storytelling is very important to me. I don't care so much if you're sticking to established canon lore. You can create your own thing and run with it, just as long as it makes sense and you're trying to make it fit. It can be great.
I'm kind of 50-50 on that. I've kind of depends on the dungeon, honestly, in my opinion.
So, good storytelling is, at least for me, important thing, because as example I use one of the interiors I did for the project Shrodil. You came to the cave, and then you find some body of skeleton of some guy, and you look at him, you look at the bag he was carrying, and that's those small details showing, for example, he was some kind of bandit, and he went there and he just kind of tripped and died because nobody was nearby.
Oh, well, personally, for myself, I kind of consider storytelling to be a pretty important aspect of dungeon design. I don't know if any of you have actually played any of my dungeon mods, but I always like to use a mixture of journals and environmental storytelling. And one of the things I usually go by is that a dungeon should have at least 1,000 words of writing, just scattered around with notes and journals and the like.
Well, that's a lot. That's probably my weakest area in modding. I don't tend to do a ton of journal entries.
Quite difficult with the Dwemer to leave notes and things like that around because nobody can speak it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I did a little side quest in GDR to find some armor and stuff, and I did a little bit of stuff there. But other than that, obviously, you're right.
Yeah, usually if I try to leave any incidental stories behind journals or anything, it's usually from somebody that was delving into the ruin, because it's kind of useless to leave anything from the dwarves behind unless you intend to just have it be something interesting that is unreadable.
And this is why I always do smuggler caves and things like that, so I can always get away with a ton of written documents.
I did play with the idea of the player actually learning Dwemerist from going through all the dungeons.
Oh yeah, the Dwemer have their own sort of language that's already kind of built into the construction set, isn't it? So you could potentially, actually go somewhere with that idea.
Yeah, I did really give it a good think about it. As I say, I've only done 4 of the ruins so far, so there's plenty of scope. I intend to add ruins on Skyrim as well. Solstheim as well. So I might just take that somewhere. I don't know yet. Some kind of stone tablets or something. Or I don't know, something.
Well, it sounds like a cool idea. And moving on to this next topic here. Do you have a particular technique or method you go through when building a dungeon?
When I first started, I kind of just went in and just started working, and I'd figure out things as I went. But after spending so long building Sobitur, I started finally making a document, usually on Google Docs or something, that has, what bare minimum rooms do I need for it, what is required for the story I'm trying to tell, and I try to work out, not exactly a layout, but a bare minimum of what needs to be featured, and then I'll start building and putting things where they make sense as I go.
Dinner time seems to be my thing. Son calls for dinner, and we just sit there and talk about what we're doing next, or what I'm doing next, shall I say. And that's how it all comes together. That, and the bathroom, and a pen and paper.
Well, for me, I'm just stick from doing the basic interior shell and trying to put some pieces together and look at this, how well it could work. Then I just, when it's finished, when I start to think how to clutter it so it look nice and have the right purpose, and that's basically my way of working.
Well, just out of curiosity, this actually seems a little redundant given this crowd now that I think about it, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway. Do you have a preferred dungeon kit from Morrowind? Do you prefer to build caverns or ancestral tombs, Dwemer Ruins, smuggler hideouts, or so on and so forth? And what draws you to that particular dungeon style? And yes, I know all of you are pretty much Dwemer Ruin modders, so I don't even know why I'm asking this.
I mean, yeah, Dwemer and Daedric usually for me. I usually end up using a lot of Molten Cave or Ash Cave as well, but generally speaking, Dwemer and Daedric.
Oh yeah, same for me. When you ask, I love dabbling with Dwemer stuff. Also, the Daedric kids, but well, the most cases for my again, the most times I just try to use different stuff, and I like to use just probably every kit, but velocity stuff is the thing draws my attention for a little longer. Also, as dungeon designer, I just need to use various kits, so I should probably say I don't have preferences at this time, because when working for Project Zero Deal on or project or other projects, I need just to use any kind of kits they have, so probably the most I use the cave set the most, because caves are mainly focused interiors at the moment for me.
Despise the Adric Ruin setup. I just really, really despise it. I think it's almost impossible to get the damn thing together. I'll stick with Dwemer, and if I need anything, I just make it. That tends to be the way things happen.
Yeah, I think my issue with the Daedric Ruin tile set is, at least in terms of, interiors, making a Daedric shrine and all that, there's not really a whole lot of room for creativity, It's a very bare-bones tile set in that regard.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, I've had to use modders' resources like crazy to make larger, more interesting rooms, especially in things like Sobitur and some of the other stuff I've worked on. And one of the projects I'm working on right now, I've had to use a lot of custom modders' resources. A lot of them are Darknut. So he's got the most of them out there usually, but it takes a lot of effort, especially with Daedric. I'm still collecting Daedric resources because I can't quite get what I want to put out in the Daedric mod I've been working on.
I obviously missed something, but I think it's super obvious for me that Dwemer Ruins is my favorite by far, like by 1,000.
I'm looking forward to using your tile set actually for my rebirth.
Yeah, I mean, it should work. The way I did it, it's going to be an ESM, so that it'll work for everybody. I already tested it with the ones that you've released so far, and it works.
Well, the beauty is I can always tweak it if it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, there may be a little places that you may have to tweak, but it's not anything like deal-breaking even as it is now. You'll probably see things that everybody else wouldn't, You know how that goes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, kind of no surprise that you prefer the Dwemer Dungeon kit there.
Yeah, I think I started thinking about modding the main quest about 3 minutes after I finished it the first time.
God, it's awful.
Yeah, it really is surprisingly low-key, considering that leading up it's actually pretty fun.
Got something special planned for the vampire ones, but Dagoth definitely needs some attention as well.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, mine and your points of view on how to do it are quite a bit different, so that's the more the merrier for me, because it'll just be a different way to play it.
Oh, agreed.
Oh yes, that's it's kind of fascinating watching your two projects side by side. You know, Darknut's Great Dwemer Ruins and RubberMan's Dwemer Rebirth Project. They are definitely very different takes on the Dwemer Ruins of Morrowind.
I think all my inspiration has come from Skyrim, or most of it. So, and obviously Darknut hasn't. So we'll have to see where it goes at the end of the day, and hopefully we can meet in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be places where they're completely incompatible, but that's okay too. I mean, like I said, the more the merrier, because you can play it through with mine and play it through with yours, and it's a totally different experience, and that's great. And that's why I love Morrowind.
Yep, every time it's different.
Oh yes, more content is always a good thing. And just out of curiosity, what is each of yours favorite dungeon mods? And, you know, besides your own, of course.
For me, probably would have to be Ghost Path Isle. I mean, it's hard to find that one out there anymore. I re-uploaded it to the Netsis a while back because I couldn't find it anywhere after Planet Elder Scrolls went down. But that's the mod that probably most inspired me to make Sobitur, because it was a high-level mod that was still very difficult, even with my characters that, you know, were one-shotting gods.
Well, I'm trying to think. I'm going really old school on you here. I mean, I absolutely loved Wizard's Island, and you have to be from the early days of Morrowind to probably even know what that is. I absolutely love that. I love that mod. And Sobitur, I mean, I enjoyed the heck out of that. Matter of fact, I'd kind of forgotten about it. It'd been a while since I played it, and I've seen you've been updating it. I'm gonna download the latest version and give that a go again, maybe tonight.
Well, not really a dungeon mod, but my absolute favourite of all time has got to be the Underground, and that's a lot of it is based in caves and dungeons and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's got to be my absolute most favourite.
Well, I probably don't have any particular favorite mod, but if I should pick something, I probably would say it's Wizard Islands, because it was the first big mod I played back then.
Oh man, you guys are mentioning a lot of mods I really love. I mean, Wizard's Island and the Underground both have some absolutely great atmosphere in their dungeon designs, and also some great writing too, as well, as I remember.
Yeah, I actually forgot about the Underground. That one is epic as well. It's a whole different era.
Yeah, I'm young, but this is young. Not to remember early day of Morrowind Modding.
It used some of the what I would call the greats back then, you know, like Canadian Ice, etc., and Hound Dog and Qual, but you don't see that much anymore. People pulling together and doing stuff.
I mean, the game is 50 years old after all. I mean, it's astounding to me that it's even this active. I mean, I love it. I'm happy, but it amazes me.
Oh gosh, all this discussion of the Underground and Wizard's Islands has reminded me of some of the other, you know, great classics from back then. Valdian, the Black Mill, Thor's Legacy, Inferno's Island. And gosh, there were just so many great mods back then. Well, relatively great anyway. Obviously they have a lot of problems underneath the more modern light, but you know what I mean.
Well, to say it was all new back then, the stuff they produced was awesome, really. I mean, now we know things that we didn't know there. And yeah, it was just too good to be true.
Honestly, back when first did GDR, actually that was extremely taboo. It was extremely taboo to touch anything from the original game. It was all about just adding stuff only. And the fact that I changed the main quest, I mean, it went over after a while, but some of the old school people gave me a lot of grief about it.
Oh, purists! Yeah, I think we should have a big fire and burn all the purists. Let's be honest with you.
I mean, for the longest time, most mods were just like, you know, adding a player house to Balmora, or adding a player house to Balmora, or, you know, adding a player house to Balmora. The original things.
Yeah, I mean, I believe its point. everything's out the window. I mean, it's whatever, and obviously it's going to be incompatible with some things. If it's important enough, there'll be patches made. If not, so be it. That's the way I'm looking at it at point. My
Gotcha.
Red Mountain is going to be incompatible with everything.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've got people asking me right now to patch up Balisra Rising with less generic NPC, so that they can play them both together. I still need to get on that.
Just to sort of add on to the Balmora House comment, I've been working on a mod testing database where I go through and test every mod I can, and one of the things I've noticed is that there are just an absurdly large number of mods just called Balmora House. Not only are they a house in Balmora, their name is just Balmora House. There are half a dozen mods with that same name by different authors, and all of them are some degree of not very good.
I mean, most of those were just personal projects by those people, so they had a place to dump their stuff in Balmora, because that's where a lot of people hang out for a long time in the game. So it was just a very convenient place to have a house, and then they uploaded their little personal project, and I mean, let's face it, a lot of those just aren't that great when you put them side by side with anything else.
Yeah, but in a way, that's the beauty of Morrowind as well. It's so accessible.
I mean, I still have the files for my first ever mod that I made, and all it is a Dwemer door without any frame or anything, just shoved on the hill above Caius Causade's house, and it goes into this chamber that's before I knew you could make things snap to each other, so there's little gaps you can see into the void and stuff like that, and I've just got every vanilla armor set hanging on the wall so I could grab whatever I wanted.
That's awesome.
I mean, that was the first mod I made, and I was so proud of it. And it sucks.
Well, the first mod I've ever made was Agahnim Companion. I just took some script from the existing mod and modified it a bit, and just had an awesome Agahnim working with me and fighting with stuff I could normally handle.
Well, my first Morrowind mod was first-person helms, which is a little bit not fair. I'd been modding other games quite a bit at that point, so it wasn't like I was a complete noob at modding. But yeah, it was the first one I ever did. I need to redo that so it works with the current MGE. Actually, been messing with it, but I don't have it ready for prime time yet.
I remember my first one. In 2003, something like that.
I think the first mod of mine that I'd consider to be halfway decent was another personal thing where I added a mine to Odai Plateau so that I could get all the materials and stuff from my stronghold. So my first stronghold was Odai. And I could get all the materials that I needed to take to Mournhold to have armor made.
These sound all like cheaty mods.
Well, I made myself have to fight for it at least. I had some buffed up Dwemer Animunculi and an imperfect guarding all the stuff.
I'll forgive you then.
I made myself at least have to be leveled up enough to kill all that stuff. Why there's an imperfect in a random mine underneath Odai Plateau, don't ask me though.
That doesn't really work with the lore, does it?
Sothasil felt like screwing around.
I guess you can make anything work if you try hard enough.
Right, I think I remember. Didn't you send me that file?
I think I sent you the original Odai Mines file, yeah. Then later on I made one for Balisra and Uvirith's Grave too. And this is still in my noob days, because if I sent you the original file, there's an inexplicable floating pile of ashes with collision outside of the door, because I thought you had to make the arrows that the doors teleported you to, so I made a whole new item form, and then I didn't know how to delete things because I had already saved it, and I didn't know that you could make that mod active again and be able to delete things. So I just made a second plugin file to just slap on top of it. But even though I deleted it in the second one, it's still there in the first one. So I ended up changing it into just a pile of ash so you could get past it.
I had so many add-ons for add-ons. I just screwed my first couple of save files when I just installed. When I created a new installation, because I didn't know about cleaning saves and stuff, and I needed to start new games because I had too much existing mods in my save file. So
oh yeah, none of my first dozen little tiny mods were cleaned because I didn't know about it.
No one does the first time.
Yeah,
No,
I'm trying to remember what the website was I was hosting them on. I think, God, I can't remember now. It was gone a long time ago, and then I moved over to Planet Elder Scrolls. But the people on those forums actually helped me learn and introduced me to cleaning my mod files and stuff like that.
no, I didn't know stuff. I was like 11 or 12 when I first started to work with ModKit. I was just messing around with it and trying to. I also had a very ambitious plan, like making really big total conversion models, but let's not dig into the topic.
How many total conversions have been announced over the years? Big giant mods that never happened.
I'd love to make a total conversion. I know I don't have the patience to see it through.
No, it would take a team.
I'd say I'd love to have a go at a total conversion. I'd absolutely love to have a go. I know I've got the patience for it. And I'm quite happy to stick with it. I'd love to have a go at that, yeah. Maybe one day.
Oh, well, you could always, try and finish one of the many incomplete total conversion mods out there, like Dragon's Breach, or... What am I thinking of? The one that was in the future. What was that one?
I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember what it was called.
I can't remember now. I think I know what you're talking about, but that was a long time ago.
It was like a Fallout-inspired total conversion mod from Morrowind. The name kind of escapes me at the moment, though.
Actually, I need to buy a 3.5-inch floppy reader of some sort, because I was sorting through my old boxes after we moved into the new house, and I found a floppy disk with Morrowind written on it, and I want to know what the hell I put on this.
Can you even get such a thing at this point?
I don't know. I haven't looked. You know what? I'm going to look right now.
Oh yeah, I remember back in the day, I used to store a lot of mods on floppy disks. I just have a pile of floppy disks with mods I had downloaded that I would then put into my computer to install them, because my computer did not have internet access back in 2003, so I had to download it from somewhere else.
Yes, that was me. I had to go to my local college, and this is about the time that Zip 100 discs came out, and I thought they were the niftiest damn thing in the world. And I had so many zip discs of mods, and I can't find any of them now.
I said I think I have 2 terabytes of Morrowind now.
OMG. Boy.
I think I'm approaching 1 terabyte just because whenever I see something with interesting resources, or just a flat-out new modders resource, I download it and file it away just in case I ever need it.
Yeah, I mean, I've just got lots of mods from the very beginning and my own stuff, and just lots of it.
You probably have some mods that nobody have at these days because the websites are dead or stuff.
So, how many Morrowind installs do you each have? I mean, I've got like 15.
Oh god, I can't even count it anymore.
At this point, I've created 2 more just for the Khajiit subraces work and for the other of my projects.
Like, I've got it copied to so many drives and all, too, that I used through different years of modding. Like, I'd be at work and using a work computer to use the construction set off of a flash drive or something.
One, I'm afraid.
Just one?
Just one.
You have it backed up, I assume?
Nope.
Oh boy.
Because sometimes they get corrupt and then there's no way to fix it.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like a recipe for disaster right there. Personally, I have about 40 Morrowind installs.
40?
What?
Yeah, just 15 at the moment. I mean, those are all active, though. There may be some old backed ones. I mean, I still have my very first Morrowind playthrough that I ever did, I've got that still.
Oh yeah, I've got a Morrowind install for practically everything. Robert's bodies, better bodies, Vert's trees, Valti's trees, so on and so forth, so I can just, test mods under a variety of conditions.
Well, I have only 9 at this point.
How sticks my one?
You better back that up.
Nah, that'd be fine. I always come to the conclusion that when you do something the second time, you always do it better. So if I lose something, I don't cry about it. I just go, I'll just do that again.
I was actually happy that GOG picked up Morrowind and whatnot, because I've got Morrowind and Oblivion on there now that are DRM-free single file installs, so those are handy to have around now.
Yeah, that is good. I just have a CD image mounted of the disc, so I don't have to put the disc in anymore.
Yeah, it's if in anthologies, at least in Polish version, it's the same thing. You don't need a CD to play anymore, so I'm happy about it.
I do remember having a cracked EXE that where I wouldn't need the CD to play it anymore, and I was very happy whenever Steam picked it up, so I wouldn't need a CD anymore at all. I've actually got my CDs mounted up now. I think I showed Dark Elf Guy last time, because for the last podcast, I was the only person to show up, so me and him just chatted a little bit.
So, at the risk of causing a bit of drama, I have a fun little question here, which is, when you think of a good dungeon design, which of the core Elder Scrolls games do you think of? Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, or Daggerfall?
Skyrim.
Honestly, I mean, each game has a few interesting dungeons to it, but for me, I think overall Skyrim, because they learned they learned as they made more games, and they started making more interesting dungeons. Because I mean, you look at vanilla Morrowind dungeons, they're pretty sparse and bare for 99% of them. A few of them are somewhat interesting, but mostly because of the story with them. Then Oblivion, there's not a lot memorable to me about Oblivion in the dungeons. There's a few moments that I thought were kind of neat, but again, I think the stories were better than the game itself.
Yeah, I think if we're talking vanilla, I have to admit Skyrim. There were some things about it, like the convenient exit at the end of each dungeon. I absolutely hated that. But overall, I agree. They were the most interesting, talking vanilla.
Yeah, I still think story-wise, Oblivion Shivering Isles is probably one of my favorites, but even then, the dungeons weren't that complex.
Yeah, I would agree that Skyrim has the best dungeons, I should say. But they still have some stuff you don't like. For example, for me, it's those shortcuts towards the end, but well, I think that's somehow convenient if you ask me, even if I don't like it.
It's definitely convenient, but that's kind of part of why I don't like it. It shouldn't be convenient. Why would people make back doors to their, super secret hidden layers?
Well,
yeah.
They wouldn't.
Morrowind dungeons sometimes had some exits, but they were well hidden, like some underwater entrance and stuff. So it was, for me, it was much better than the shortcuts.
Oh yes, I've got to agree with the common sentiment here, is that I do really think the Skyrim dungeon designs are far superior Though having said that, the shortcuts are a bit immersion breaking, I would say. I mean, there's no real good reason for any ruins or things of that nature to have a shortcut back there. That's just a very strange design and not something that would happen naturally.
Yeah, I think that was just aimed directly at young console players for convenience.
It was pandering to casuals.
Oh yes, those blasted casual console players always ruining everything.
If we're talking modded, though, I still think Morrowind wins.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we're going with player-made content... Now, granted, Skyrim has some competitors in there that I would rank near my top between mods for all the games, but I think Morrowind has still put out far more content, and because of its accessibility and ease of making things, you know, there's no voiceovers or anything, people have been able to do a lot more with it. Which, actually, speaking of voiceovers... I did notice something that may make me delve into Skyrim modding a little bit, but Amazon, for their game development package that they put out, has now included automated voice acting as well. You can put in the words and choose from like 50 or 60 different voices and accents and stuff to make voices. You know, they sound somewhat robotic, but it really helps to fill in some basic parts and little bits of dialogue.
So it can't do emotions?
Not really. It's kind of limited to what the actors put into it.
Quite lucky there. My son does all the voice acting for me.
That's handy.
Yeah, the wife keeps offering as well, but I'm not sure whether she'd. Nah, not quite sure.
Yeah, right. Didn't you post a file of your son pretending to be a dark elf on the Madness chat room?
Yeah, I did actually. He does the voices in House Sidras as well, so yeah.
Sidras will go on.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, not bad.
I did me a full list of things that I didn't include, but because with people not being able to play them back, some people could, some people couldn't. It was really odd.
I could be Khajiit instead.
Yeah, that would work.
I'm afraid Imperial is the only thing I could possibly be.
Well, if I had anybody to help me, I could try to record some custom voice samples for the different Khajiit subraces. But it's only idea for now. Because, you know, that would be convenient to have not every single Khajiit subrace using the same voice.
Well, anyway, sort of wrapping the podcast up, is there any other, dungeon-related modding topics that you want to cover before we end the podcast?
I think we've covered it. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got the majority of it. I think one thing I'd like to say is, difficulty can be another factor that you want to consider while you're making them, because, like, Sobitur, I made it to where it won't even start. You won't even get the starting quest until you're level 40. It was meant to be high-level content. I've seen some dungeon mods that, like, just use basic creatures, and you could go in with like a fresh level 1 or 2 to do something that was probably meant to be done in higher. So I mean, sometimes people don't tweak the creatures correctly for the difficulty they're shooting for, so it's something to pay attention to.
Balancing stuff up is kind of hard to think if you don't know what are you doing.
Actually, avoiding creatures seems to be a better idea. I think what that's progressed to is no creatures at all, but lots of puzzles and traps that are enough to kill you, rather than having some steam centurion do his thing.
I mean, that was the way I looked when I did Dwemer Ruins. Was I viewed it as you were in this dilapidated old ruin, so why wouldn't logically it be dangerous and possible that it could kill you? That's the way I looked at the traps, not necessarily just step on a button and a knife stabs you. That's not the way I looked at it. So, and they're all but maybe one trap is totally avoidable if you pay attention. That's the way I like to do it.
Oh yes, the famous hallway that just falls away into the lava right there.
That one's actually avoidable. I'm talking about a different spot. But
I want to work in the walls. That trap where the walls close in. Maybe spikes on them. I want to work that in somewhere, if I can.
No, I like that. Honestly, my favorite trap I ever did in GDRs, and it was actually in the side quest and not the main quest to get to Dagoth, but is where you end up in the room that the water's slowly rising, and so you have to run around like a chicken and try to find the way out before you drown. That was my favorite one. I absolutely love that.
Oh, so this still expanded had a sort of puzzle that was similar to that, where you had to adjust the water levels before you drowned in order to get access to an upper level.
On that trap too, absolutely, I obscured the map as well, so if you looked at the map, it didn't show you anything, so that made it even a lot worse.
Evil.
I had one riddle trap actually in Sobitur whenever you first enter the Firelands, to where if you answered it incorrectly, it would basically kill you and take away your health. But I also coded in a thing for if people just turned on God mode and weren't losing health, that after 10 seconds it would display a message. TGM won't work here, you damn cheater, and then set your health to 0.
No, that's good. I've got a couple of anti-cheat scripts in GDR as well.
Because it should knock off 20% of your health every second, so in 5 seconds you should be dead. And it increases to the point where it's 20%, 40%, 60, 80, and then 100% tick, so you can't heal through it. So the only way to avoid dying to it is TGM. So I wanted to put in a little anti-cheat for that.
Yeah, you guys do realize that us mod showcases kind of need to cheat in order to show these mods off in a timely fashion, right?
Sure.
Well, that just makes it more fun.
TGM is necessary for testing as well, but I do get where you're coming from with that. Absolutely.
Well, if anyone's trying to show it off for a walkthrough or anything, they can just ask me, okay, how do I solve this, and I'll just tell them.
Oh yeah, that's the thing though. I don't really have time for a lot of messages going back and forth anymore. Originally, Morrowind Modding Showcases, the goal was to actually contact every author and get permission requests and all of that first. But it just became too much paperwork, and now I don't think I even contact mod authors anymore, letting them know that their mod's about to be showcased, so, it's just a bit time consuming.
I don't think people really care if their mod's going to be in a showcase. I don't think they're going to see it negatively at all. It gets them a little more attention.
Yeah, I agree.
I actually didn't know that you'd done Sobitur until like a few months after it had come out, and someone linked it to me. I just went, oh.
Which is odd. I could have sworn I sent you a permission request. It was one of the early episodes, and we did that up until episode 18, I think.
It might have been if you sent it to the email that was in the README, that email is probably no longer in use because it was just infested with like 10,000 spam messages a day, so I abandoned it.
Now, sort of wrapping everything up, do any of you have any advice for upcoming dungeon modders on, how to set up their first dungeon mod?
Yeah, don't do Dwemer Ruins.
I concur.
Avoid anything Dwemer because it's been done to death, and this is coming from someone who absolutely loves Dwemer stuff. But also start small and try to work in a few interesting things, work out some scripting, and just keep it very compact at first so you can learn things and then expand from there.
What can I say? Be creative and don't be afraid to experiment with stuff.
Yeah, I would say that. Don't be afraid. Just jump in. If you break it, start over. That's the only way to learn.
For God's sake, will someone change all the caves.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And no matter what you do, eventually you will write a script that will crash to desktop. That's just the way it is.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, and speaking of caves, there have been, two major cavern overhaul projects that haven't exactly been completed. You got Logan's Caverns Overhaul, and then you got this new Feathers project. What is the name? I can't remember. More detailed caverns?
Yeah, what we need is a complete new cavern tile set, not just going in and detailing them, in my opinion. So you can just completely make it look better from the ground up.
Yeah, the vanilla meshes for caverns and whatnot are just basically giant ovals that all look the same.
Why you use rocks to make it more fun look, more detailed look.
Yeah, just hundreds
A
and
lot of
hundreds
the
of
meshes don't
rocks.
even fit together. They don't even the right textures. If you
Just
go
use
like
hundreds and thousands of
Dwemer
rocks.
5, where you go into the caves from the Dwemer, and try and find a normal mud cave or any other cave, they don't fit. The textures don't even match.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in vanilla Morrowind, actually, that sort of thing that you really find out when you start trying to mod, just how much stuff is kind of wacky.
Speaking of so much rocks, you've probably seen Dagoth Agahnim. How does, or rather, how do the caves for the Skyrim Home of the North or Project Zero looks? Basically, you cannot see single spot of the shell mesh. That's so much rocks in there.
Oh yeah, a lot of the Skyrim Home of the Lords caverns are basically like thousands of rocks are rotated around to basically create a custom path, aren't they?
Yeah, and to be honest, it looks nice for me at least.
Yeah, it definitely looks good, but I mean, that takes so much work to do that too. And if you're gonna try to do that in every mod where you're making a cave, it's gonna take all your time.
Yep. Basically, that's why it takes so long to actually make some interiors for the project's list caves.
Doing it that way too, you end up with 1,000,000 faces, vertices and stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a problem on modern machines anymore, but like whenever I was first modding, the number of things that I put in any given interior cell kind of mattered.
Well, it still matters because the game engine will choke. There's
Yeah.
definitely a
Well,
limit.
If I remember correctly, Greatness 7 said something about it. And basically, if you try Dark Skies, there's over 1,000 objects in one interior, and you barely feel it because they're good optimized and stuff.
I think it's 1,000,000 faces, literally. I think that's the limit in any one cell.
Yeah, it's not necessarily 1,000 objects. I remember Greatness 7 was complaining a lot about one of my tomb interiors, which had 700 objects, which he complained was just lagging like crazy.
Oh, maybe those meshes weren't so optimized, like they were using bad collision meshes or stuff like that.
Yeah, optimizing the meshes makes an unbelievable difference. Well, perfect example. I have a very fast machine that I built with Morrowind in mind. It's running just shy of 5 gigahertz, and I was running around in Tamriel rebuilt and ran into a forest, and my frame rate dropped to less than 10. I mean, it was like 7 or something like that, and all it was the trees. I optimized the tree meshes that were in there, and it like tripled the frame rate.
Yeah, that's very true. I've often noticed that some of the mortals in Vanilla Morrowind just have absurdly high face counts when it comes to other things. Like a crate might have a face count of like 12, and then a lantern will have a face count of 5,000 for some reason.
Oh, I just loaded Dark Sky main cave, and it's at this point 1,234 objects. Did you feel it when you loaded it in game, Darknut guy? I don't think so. Didn't lag so much because I'm fairly sure the Greatness 7 did some optimizations to the custom meshes.
Oh yeah, it was fine actually. With my new computer now, I don't really have any lag issues with interior cells. However, having said that, exterior cells that have a lot of detailing are still a problem. Like Karth Waston, for example, is still a bit laggy in several spots.
Probably needs some more optimization. We need to actually get Greatness 7 to do his godly work on his tools.
That little script that he's got, man, that thing's great. It works really amazing. I did my whole X mess direct with it. Makes a difference.
I was just speaking about Darkscape. I was laughing at my ass when you said in your not a podcast, your video for the last weekend of Morrowind Modding Madness, when you said to Greatness 7 no more mode deletion. And actually I'm only one guy trying to finish this at this point, because Greatness 7 is burnt out and he don't care at this point, and the drunken mudcrab is working on his companion and cannot be bothered by finishing it too. So I'm just sitting there trying to clutter more this interior cell and do maybe some dialogues, maybe some quests. No, it will be released at some point. I'm not saying it won't be so soon, because I'm working for interior for Skyrim Horn of the North, and also on those carried sub-races, and also I started to work on implementation of Marmer race to the Tamriel data, so it's lots of stuff going on at this moment for me, at least when it comes to projects.
I'm glad you're still working on it, and I was just directing those comments at Greatness 7 because he did delete 2 of their mods last year from, last year's modding competition. It's like, why would you do that? Why would you make a mod then delete it? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I get you. Well, I was joking. I go and delete all our work from this year, and you still blame Greatness 7.
Well, I would, because he deserves to be blamed. I mean, after all he's done from last year.
Oh yeah, which mods he deleted? It was maybe Wabajack? Or...
No. Wabbajack's still on there, thankfully. He deleted Andrano Retribution and Faction Quarters mod.
I would say what can I say? It was nice till it lost. But he probably didn't want to continue those projects, and well, I don't see it in his head, so I cannot really say what he was thinking.
Yeah, I guess that pretty much wraps up the podcast. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
I always enjoy putting the voice to the username. It's always
Yeah.
entertaining.
I wanted to hear as well.
So we could talk sometime in the Discord. Lol.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Alrighty then. Is that it?
Yep, that's pretty much it. Our next podcast is going to be 15 years of Morrowind Modding. That is tentatively scheduled for December 2nd, though that is still kind of up in the air, so if anyone's interested, that will be the next recording time and date and topic. 15 years of Morrowind Modding history. And yeah, that's pretty much it otherwise.
I'm looking
Yeah,
forward
yeah.
to it.